Okay, hello and welcome to our weekly Wednesday night live stream. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that I try and do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it runs, I don't know, 2, 3 hours, just kind of depends. So if you are new here, welcome, and if you are returning here, welcome. So, if you would like to be notified of when I go live, you can text the words Dana Live, all one word, to the number 22999. And I also wanted to let you guys know that we're starting up a new text service, the kind of thing. So, if you're looking for kind of words of encouragement, support, just kind of helpful, friendly, caring reminders that'll help you stay on track, you can text the word I thrive, all one word, to the number 22999. And you'll just get, we're going to try to go, I think, maybe 4 times a week, words of encouragement, support, these kinds of things that will start up here within the next few days. So if that's something you're interested in, please um, make sure to subscribe. And there's no cost to you. The only cost is dependent upon your phone service. So if you have a plan that charges, per text or something, then data usages apply, but there's no charge on our end. So let's see. UNA says, hi, I was in another live stream about UFOs, but yours takes priority. Oh, well, thank you. Uh, I've been big into, or not, I guess, watching a bunch of UFO stuff lately as well. Was it a good live stream? What were you guys talking about? Embers, oh, thank you, says, hi, Dana. Huge thanks for giving us clarity and solid education and advice while we all heal. Well, you are very, very welcome. And I'm really glad to be able to do this, and I'm glad that people find it helpful. Um, Ricky says, hi, Dana. Hi, Ricky. How you doing? Jillian says, happy New Year. Yes. Oh my gosh. It's wild to think that it's the new year already. There's a part of my brain that knows that, but then there's a part of me that just continually forgets. I just am been in the biggest time warp probably all of my life, but really more so for 2020. It's been very disorienting. So Crystal asks, how am I doing tonight? I'm doing pretty well. I have to say I'm really excited. So one of my plans for um, 2021 is I'm really big into like self-sufficiency kind of in all forms, and gardening is something I've always enjoyed. And yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of creating more of like a sustainable homestead kind of a thing, and with an indoor greenhouse of some sort. And so that's going to be its own adventure, but I'm really looking forward to that. So I was watching a bunch of videos, and we were discussing what that would look like and how to go about it. So yeah, I'm good. UNA says, yeah, it was Dark Journalists live stream talking about current UFO stuff and papers uncovered. It was interesting. Yeah, that sounds interesting. So I guess with that said, I have quite a few questions that have been emailed to me or texted to me. And I guess I'll just jump into that. Okay, so this is from Dimitri, who says, "Dear Dana, thank you so much for answering my previous question. That was very encouraging, and thank you for including it in the live stream, and that you do them every week. I find a lot of support in them. What is your take on polyamory? What would be the things to look out for, especially for former victims of abuse? How to not confuse it with legalizing cheating and squirrely behavior in a relationship? Sincerely, Dimitri." Okay, so that's kind of a big topic. My take on polyamory is, uh, I think whatever two, I guess two or more consenting adults decide that they want to do, I have no problem with that. However, with that said, there's, in terms of survivors of abuse, or so I guess some of the other issues that kind of can arise with polyamory is um, unequal power dynamics, and this is the same with like BDSM type communities as well. So I guess my concern, what to watch out for, would be that consent is present, that everyone knows where their boundaries are, knows when they're being crossed, and how to address that if and when that does happen, and is honest with themselves about what's okay for them. Um, it's not uncommon for people that have experienced abuse to tend to gravitate towards unequal power dynamics, because maybe due to low self-esteem, that's what they feel they deserve, or um, due to that comfort, or kind of due to that comfort with that imbalanced power dynamic. That's when it becomes concerning for me. So if a person really, and again, this is more kind of BDSM type stuff, but if there's really that feeling of safety when another person's completely dominating them, uh, you know it's one thing if it's kind of playing around with power dynamics in the bedroom. If it's a 24/7 lifestyle, on a personal note, I guess I would just want to make sure that that they're not, my concerns would be that they're acting out of some previous trauma, which is often the case, but it's not always the case. So, you know, it's not every polyamorous relation, not every polyamorous or BDSM relationship is abusive. It really just depends on the people involved, but there has to be a healthy relationship at the core before you're going to add in kind of these types of dynamics. So I guess that's kind of my thought. There still is cheating in polyamorous relationships. So, just because, again, this goes back to consent and open, honest, sincere communication, and people really, and that's a hard line to walk, I would imagine. I think it's difficult enough with two people. You add more into the mix, it compounds the challenges. So just some pointers to consider. Um, okay. Let's see. Here's another question. I'm going to leave the name anonymous just because I'm not sure if she wants it shared on the live stream, but she was saying her daughter had been sexually abused by her ex-husband. And part of his abuse was to traffic her on Plenty of Fish. So when she says, when I watch movies about human trafficking, I see my daughter. I bawl all through the movies. I think my PTSD is triggered, yet I am drawn to watch these movies over and over. Why do I feel drawn to torture myself like that? So my thoughts on this are, and we spoke about this, I believe it was in the previous live stream, um, about you. I think you had asked, what signs did you miss? And that was a big kind of focus of your attention for quite a while, of trying to figure out, okay, well, where did I go wrong? What did I miss? These kinds of things. My initial reaction to your question is, I wonder how much of that has to do also with watching these movies, of what it's that um, it's just kind of anxiety response, that of wanting to be protective and wanting to avoid a situation like that again, of what signs are there, what did I miss, and in watching that over and over. So that is my initial response. There absolutely could be more to it. um, I guess I would also kind of wonder, you mentioned that you just bawl all through the movies, which makes complete sense because these movies are heartbreaking in and of themselves, let alone having it strike such a personal chord. Of I would be curious to know how much have you cried about and just allowed yourself to grieve and to feel the feelings that you have outside of watching movies like this? Because the reason I ask is because sometimes movies can be can really help to elicit a lot of emotions that we keep pent up. So, for people that tend to feel numb or angry, uh, experience seeing movies that elicit really that elicit other emotions can really be appealing to a person because it just allows them to feel those feelings that have been pent up for so long. So that's another thought too. Okay. Let's see here. I should highlight these as I go so I can. Um, Let me scroll. Let's see. Also, Jack, I emailed you the answer to your question. So please check your inbox. I apologize for the delay. Things have been really hectic around here. Our fridge went out on Christmas, and then trying to find a new fridge and just getting it delivered, everything. It's just been kind of chaotic on top of everything else. Ember says, my therapist encourages crying, which I always do in EMDR because she says it helps to cleanse traumas. It absolutely does. It's part of processing an emotion. That feeling an emotion fully is absolutely part of the process of processing the emotion. So, and crying is one of those things, whether it's intentional or not, it's kind of mm, crying or expression of sadness tends to make people and others around them uncomfortable. And so we pick up a lot of messages about expressing sadness throughout our lifetime. You know, a person starts to tear up, another person hands them a Kleenex. A person starts to tear up, and again, these are oftentimes well intended, but the message is, oh, kind of here, stop the tears, basically. Um, a person starts crying, they leave the room, or they excuse themselves and go to the bathroom. Or, interestingly enough, too, what I've come to learn is if a person is experiencing really any emotion, but especially sadness, one of our natural responses is to want to comfort them. And we tend to do this by touching. So like putting our hand on their back or wanting to give them a hug or what have you. But if a person is sharing an experience and that touch breaks the emotion, so it can have the opposite effect if the goal is to have that person or to kind of hold space for that person to allow them to feel that feeling fully. Creative Ingenuity says, I've been taught not to cry. Sadly, I can't cry unless someone hurts me. This, and I'm so sorry that you experienced that. This is kind of what we were just talking about with movies. This is one of the benefits of emotionally intense movies is they can allow for tears to start flowing, and it can make it a more comfortable scenario, especially if you're home alone, where there's not this feeling of, oh, I don't want anybody else to see me cry, or I don't want to be embarrassed, or I don't want a person to think any certain way about me. You can just let the tears flow. There's lots of really kind of tear jerking movies out there that don't involve, um, you know, relationships, or I should say like significant other type relationships, which because those can be difficult to watch if you're fresh out of a relationship and you're trying to cry, but then you see this the Hollywood version of this love story that can just be too much. But movies like Old Yeller, things along those kinds of lines. There's one of my old favorites is a movie called Beaches. It's with Barbara Hershey and Bette Midler, and it's a friendship between these two women, and that's that's great. I cry every single time I see that movie. It's just wonderful. But it's a very cleansing feeling. Um, okay, good. Jack says, I got your email and I read it. Good. Nance asks, does anyone else experience short-term memory loss with emotional flashbacks? When you're experiencing the short-term memory loss, is it kind of while is it, I guess, what kind of memories are you losing? Is it more of a time loss kind of a thing, or what? Because the reason I ask, when we're caught up in an emotional flashback, it's a form of disassociating. So we're not there, we're caught up in that emotional flashback. And whenever we do that, whenever our brain goes elsewhere, we tend to not remember what's going on. It's very similar on a more mild level to driving to and from a place you've been 1,000 times, like to work or something like that, where your mind wanders and it's just not there. And then you get to work or wherever you're going and you're kind of shocked. Like, that's really scary. I don't even remember driving home, or you're just kind of missing large chunks of time. So that loss of time in that sense is normal because your brain is you're kind of caught up in a daydream, even though an emotional flashback doesn't feel pleasant like a daydream does, but it's the same type of or similar process that's going on. Okay, let's see here. um, Tammy says, yes, the movie Beaches gets me every time. Yeah, such a great movie about friendship. I haven't seen it in years. I should go back and watch it. Rick asks, why feel or care about anything? What good does it do? Well, it engages you in a fuller range of the human experience. I think that's the main reason why feeling and caring is important. Life is kind of diminished if we don't. So it's not that feeling and or caring are the problem. Or that feeling or caring causes pain necessarily. It's placing our feelings and our care on to those that take it for granted or abuse us, or uh, just causes harm in some way. That's what's painful. It's it's kind of pouring these deep emotions into a bucket of somebody but their bucket only has holes in the bottom, and it's just never enough, and it's just kind of a large waste of energy, and not to mention incredibly painful. Rick says, well, it looks like so many people are enjoying their diminished lives more than my full one. Okay, so if we're saying that their lives are diminished because they don't care or they don't feel, um, I know on the surface it can seem like that, right? Like it can seem like, oh, well, gosh, must be great to be a narcissist or a sociopath. And there are really no feelings of guilt. There's no feelings of remorse. There's no feelings of empathy. It's just all about you. And there's no deep connection to other people. And just that seems really great. But really think about that. There's also no deep bonds to other people. And relationships, when they're healthy and nourishing, they're truly nourishing. And they're enjoyable, and it's those connections that uh, can really make life worth living. When like I said, when those connections are to problematic people, then it's nothing but pain. And that in its having feelings and caring about having that deep emotional investment in problematic people is is also a form of diminishment. So when we're able to learn that you have value, you have worth, you matter, that you have it's appropriate to have boundaries, standards, and deal breakers, and um, to that sometimes that involves certain relationships needing to end. And so when we do that, when we are able to see that and acknowledge that and start kind of pruning back these dead relationships, that's when we start to grow. So I forget, I'm drawing a blank. Mel, I forget her last name, came up with um, she wrote about this thing on her blog. It was kind of our relationships with people tend to come in three ways. They're like a tree. So relationships can either be leaves, which are seasonal. They can be branches, which are supportive to some extent, or they can be roots. And those roots are very nourishing and fulfilling. But I would add to that, a big part of our own happiness and contentment in life is being able to separate the differences, or to discern the differences between leaves, branches, and roots. So we this is a part of setting boundaries too, is understanding that not every person is going to be in your inner circle, nor should they be. So a person has to really earn their spot in your inner circle based off of time and appropriate behavior. So I think for a lot of us, we've tended to struggled with very porous boundaries, not realizing this. And so it was sort of like, okay, well, I'll just let everybody in my inner circle. And there was no level of discernment. It was kind of this mindset, oh, I'm going to trust you until you prove otherwise. And so that is problematic, because that leads to, well, I'm just going to bring everybody right in, and I'm going to give you full access to me and my life. And if you hurt me, you know, then I'll respond to it, versus going slowly, getting to know people and gradually moving them into your inner circle. Once they've proven that that they are worthy of being in your inner circle. Yeah, UNA says, I wouldn't trade my life for theirs. The hellish life that they have, no way. It would be like saying I don't want to be able to smell a rose because I would also be able to smell a skunk. Worth it to me. That's a great analogy. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Keep in mind that with with narcissists and sociopaths, their emotional range is very limited. So it it's it's a lot of like anger and contempt and feelings of frustration, hostility. There isn't um, I wouldn't say that there really is like a true level of joy. It, I think it's impossible to fully enjoy life with such a profoundly unhealthy ego. So they're missing out. They don't realize it, but they're missing out. Restivan says, well, people will still breach our trust and disappoint us even when we've screened them. Yes, absolutely. And that's part of boundaries, standards, and deal breakers. So it's not like the screening process is a one and done kind of a thing. It's an ongoing process. And we're on a, this might sound like it's a lot of work, but it's really not once you kind of just get this down. But when you're in tune with how you're being treated on on a moment to moment basis in that relationship with the other person, you're able to adjust and adapt accordingly. So and oftentimes that involves setting boundaries and speaking up assertively, saying, hey, you know what, I don't like that. Or, hey, you know what, I'm just really feeling frustrated now. You know, oh, I have to cancel plans. You're making your wants and needs known in a tactful way. You're not minimizing um, their different boundary crosses and assuming the best in them, or hoping that things will change, or thinking that it's not a big deal when it actually is a big deal for you, whatever that might be. So you're addressing things as they come up. So when there are hurt feelings, when there are disappointments, those things are brought up. If they're, it's more about, well, I should say, it's less about when those things happen, because those things will happen because people are human, and life happens and feelings do get hurt. How that how they handle when you bring something up makes the ocean of difference. So that's yeah. So I guess the point of that is it's really important. I think a lot of survivors of abuse tend to look for healthy relationship, but it's more of with this kind of one and done screening process kind of mentality of, I get asked the question all the time, well, how do I know you know, with if this person is going to be problematic or not, and you know, how long do I have to wait until their bad behavior surfaces? They want to know precisely, and you know, to some extent, most people can be on their best behavior. I don't know, for a few months or whatever, but generally, you start seeing things. But even then, even when they're on the best behavior, it's they still aren't mind readers, so they're not going to know where your boundaries are. They're not going to know all these things. There is no perfect person out there. There's only like this whole concept of a healthy enough person or a healthy enough relationship, and that involves how they handle conflict and confrontation and frustration and anger, and how they respond to your wants and needs and thoughts and feelings. And if they respond well or well enough, then you know, you kind of learn from that one experience, okay, this person feels emotionally safe. And then as these situations tend to arise, you'll start that belief will either cement or it'll start to dissolve depending on how they react to you. So if in one situation they come across as very kind and supportive and loving, but the next one they're not, or they rage on you or whatever it is, then you know it's sort of like a plus one. Okay, now I've got a minus one. You see what I'm saying? And you're adjusting accordingly. So okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Uh, oh boy, yes, changing my life says, yeah, that tactful way is such a learning curve. It's taken me a while to figure it out. Yes, absolutely. And it's one thing to know, it's one thing to have a tactful response when we're not feeling like activated, right? So if somebody asks us, let's say, for example, kind of, I don't know, a benign request, you know, hey, do you mind if I don't know, um, drop my kids off? Can you babysit my children for 3 days? Right? Some sort of there, it's well intended on their end, but it crosses your boundary, but it's not activating. It's sort of like, oh gosh, no, I'm so sorry, I can't. Maybe I could see the kids for a few hours on Friday, like that's what works for me, or whatnot. But where you're not activated, it's profoundly more difficult to stay tactful when somebody says or does something that really strikes a chord with you. I remember, and I shared this happened a couple of years ago. I was out to lunch with a friend of mine, and somehow we got on the topic of my experience with Jack. And I felt like she was wanting to debate it, and she had no understanding of it. And it was very clear. I didn't want to I just knew where this conversation, it just wasn't going to end well. Right. So I didn't want to sit there and try to explain everything to her. And I was finding myself getting more and more frustrated. And I was responding to her questions. I was doing all that. And finally, I got so frustrated. I slammed my fist down on the table, and in tears were just welling up in my eyes. And I was so just enraged, and I felt so violated. And all of those emotions just came flooding back. And so the whole time I'd been responding to questions, and I'd been trying to kind of defend my actions at the time, during that relationship, which I don't know, it was like 10 years ago. I'm not even like emotionally, uh, I wouldn't even say sensitive about that situation, but that conversation really caught me so off guard. And it was very difficult. And I was horrified by my reaction. And because that's not me. That's not how I respond to things at all. Um, so the point being is uh, some certain situations are easier than others to set a boundary tactfully, or to even engage in conversations, a reasonable conversation. So yeah, it takes time and practice. One of the techniques that I encourage people to do, and again, this is very difficult because once we start getting activated, when we kind of go into that fight or flight mode, when anger starts to bubble up, that logic and critical thinking part of our brain just goes offline. So it's very, very difficult to be able to kind of bring yourself down from that, when, especially if it's a situation where there's a lot of emotional rawness there. But one of the things that can help is, if kind of going in, okay, this person, um, which wasn't normally the case with this friend of mine, which I think was why it caught me so off guard. But if you have certain kind of difficult people in your life that tend to be emotionally insensitive, or kind of high conflict people, it can help to just practice giving yourself space. That's all you have to do. Get up, go to the bathroom. The goal here is to break that knee jerk reaction, or to try to think or to break that feeling of, oh, I've got to have something to say, or some sort of comeback or response to them right now. Like, no, you don't. No, you don't. You can simply say, you know what? I've got to go to the bathroom. And you go to the bathroom, splash some water on your face, wash your hands, take a few deep breaths. The purpose of that is to bring that stress level down, to get yourself out of that fight or flight. Because when, like I said, when that fight or flight kicks in, you're not thinking rationally. You're not probably not going to be rational either. So no kind of constructive conversation is going to happen when a person's in fight or flight mode. So giving yourself time and space to just breathe and calm down, and then, if you have to, then go back and re-engage with them. It really makes an ocean of difference. Carol asks, what's a good way to respond to or have conversations with people who are struggling emotionally? I tend to overwhelm them with advice because I'm so plugged into mental health resources. Well, it, sometimes one of the best things that we can do for people that are really struggling emotionally isn't so much to have a conversation with them, it's just to listen, and listen in a non-judgmental, just supportive way, and let them do all the talking, and acknowledge, validate their feelings. instead of trying to kind of jump the gun and give advice or give resources or try to fix their solution or fix their problem. This is a lot. Again, this can definitely be easier said than done, especially if we've experienced a very similar type of thing that they're going through, because we kind of see ourselves in that. So it's sort of like, oh, I want to spare you from all of the pain and all of the searching and all of the time that it took me to find the answers. And so I don't want to see you go through that. And so here's, kind of everything that all the resources, and here's everything that you need. But if a person is almost in shock because they're just emotionally struggling so much, they're not in that place of more likely than not, they're not really in that place of taking action. They're in that place of just feeling emotionally raw and just needing to be validated and heard. Just having another person be witness to their experience is huge, huge. And that's, like I said, that's difficult. That can be very difficult to do because it feels like, well, I'm not doing enough. Like I'm not doing enough. And the best way for me to support them is to give them advice and give them resources and just, help them along and all of that. But realizing, and sometimes you can ask, and I not sometimes, I would encourage you to ask the person of, how can I support you in this right now? Um, I have lots of advice and resources and all of that, but would that be helpful? Or would it be more helpful? Or would you just like for somebody to listen right now? Because I can do either. And let them set the pace. So it's a difficult skill to just sit there and listen to a person who is in crisis. It really is. It takes practice, but it is helpful. Okay, let me scroll down here. Huffle Mom asks, how do you validate someone's tapes or like internal messages without agreeing with them? For example, Jack still sometimes gets down on himself. I know he's hearing old tapes, but not his needs. You, I think communication is key. So talking to Jack about this ahead of time is helpful. So asking him, how do you think the what would be a helpful response for me to have in situations like this? And one of the things that can be helpful, but again, this really just depends person to person. This is why communication is so important. But asking him, if he starts in on stuff like that, oh, oh, I'm just I'm no good. I'm so stupid. I just make mistakes right and left, and I'll never get anything right. These kinds of kind of negative core beliefs, if this kind of stuff is coming up, you can validate his feelings of uh, so this is the difference between validating what he's saying and validating the feeling behind it. So the feeling behind that would be frustration, right? Or disappointment, or um, yeah, I guess frustration or disappointment. Oh, honey, I know I hear you. You sound very frustrated and very disappointed, and I know you were really wanting this project to work out a certain way. You spent so much time on it, and so you're validating those feelings of how he's feeling and kind of why he's feeling that way. But then to add kind of a twist to it, you can say something like, but I just want to point out, in all fairness, that you also did a lot of things right. Yes, this one thing didn't work out. And again, I know you're frustrated. I know you're disappointed. I saw how much time you put into this, but I don't think that's really being fair to yourself. There's so many other things that you did right with this project that really shows that you are competent, you are capable. And I hope that you can see that. So, uh, that's kind of the challenge with core beliefs, is spotting the problematic ones, acknowledging them for what they are, because those negative core beliefs tend to come from more of that wounded child perspective, which is that those feelings, they tend to be very absolute, very black or white, right? Like all or nothing. Very I am so stupid, I am I'll never learn, nobody likes me, um, I'll never, I'll never, I don't know, finish this. I'm such a loser. Whatever it might be, really harsh messages that we tell ourselves, um, that are in absolutes. Those tend, really any message that we're telling ourselves that's an absolute is shows a lack of balance, and it's a negative core belief. So the key to kind of deprogramming from that is to find that adaptive adult response. So, and it can help to point it out. You and Jack are in the very enviable position that you both are very personal growth oriented, and you have great communication about these things. So this everything that I am describing can be a lot more challenging if only one person uh, kind of has this insight and this desire to kind of untangle all, to get under the hood and untangle all their wires, whereas the other person doesn't. So so just having the knowledge that there's such a thing as negative core beliefs, and core beliefs in general, and that we all have them. And really a big part of changing our life has to do with changing these core beliefs and making them, finding balance within them, and choosing the more empowered message. So instead of saying, oh, I'll never learn, being like, uh, I've learned lots of things, and I continue to learn every single day. I may not have it all figured out right now, or it might be taking me longer than I thought it would, but I am still capable of learning. Uh, Another one would be, I'm trying to think of some other examples off the top of my head here. Let me see. I think I have something on my computer. Hold on just a second. Okay, so another belief would be, okay, I'm a failure. And a more adaptive response would be, okay, because let's say that the event that happened was the person failed the test. If their core belief defaults to, I am a failure, why bother? Everything I fail, everything I do. That's that kind of learned helplessness, and this feeling that things will never change. This is definitely like more of a wounded child response. It's that absolute. There is no middle ground. It's it's internalized. So failing a test doesn't mean that you're a failure. Like, we don't have to internalize our behavior or the results that we're getting. Frankly, even to do so is problematic on its own. So failing a test doesn't mean that you're a failure. It just means you failed the test. So a more adaptive adult response would be, you know what, I'm perfectly capable when I give my best effort, or uh, I don't fail all tests, or maybe I just need to study harder or study differently next time. But there's lots of things I do succeed at. Okay, so let me scroll here. Rick says, I have extreme self-loathing and delusions of grandeur and a tendency to do nothing but persist from moment to moment. Well, I would say that the delusions of grandeur and the tendency to do nothing but persist are probably very deeply tied into that sense of extreme self-loathing. Those delusions of grandeur on the outside to other people can sometimes look like very high self-esteem, but the reality is it's not. It's very fragile self-esteem. And so it's this feeling, of smug superiority, of I'm better than everybody else. And the reason we can slip into that, it's when we're not feeling as good as anybody else. And so we're kind of overcompensating for that and trying to prove to ourselves, no, I am the best. I am number one. Nobody is better than me. Again, it's when we're slipping into these absolutes, right? Nobody's better than me. I'm a genius. I'm brilliant. I have all these ideas. This kind of extreme um, thinking, we all can slip into it from time to time, especially if we're really passionate about a subject and somebody disagrees with us. We can slip into that role of feeling superior. I've got it all figured out. You're a moron, kind of a thing. But um, if it's an ongoing feeling of grandiosity, especially if it's not grounded in reality, then it's a form of disassociation. It's a form of escaping your moment to moment pain by kind of daydreaming into the future of where everything works out for you, and that um, you're kind of at the center of everything and life is great. Your life is great. So a lot of that tends to be more of a trauma response than anything. Um, okay, let's see. Wine Love says, how do I stop feeling so angry that my ex, who is a pathological liar and is having an awesome holiday with his new supply, and I'm all alone? He got her an $8,000 bag. I think it can help to view these situations as to you're only seeing a snapshot in time. And when we do that, we're kind of missing the bigger picture. So, and you've created this whole narrative around this of, oh, he's having an awesome holiday with her and he got her $8,000 purse. That's the narrative you've created. You really don't know that for sure if they've had an awesome holiday. And you don't even know if the bag is real, frankly. Okay. But even if it is, and even if they did have an awesome holiday, you know this person. He's a pathological liar. There is no happily ever after with the pathological liar. So if anything, that $8,000 bag, it's sad because now you're seeing her getting possibly roped in, feeling very, oh, this is such a wonderful gift. This really shows me how much he cares. I have this wonderful relationship. You kind of being from the future, right? You know the road that they're going down, or more so that she's going down. You know what's on the horizon. This is nothing to look back at enviously. This is yet another life that's going to be derailed by him. So keep in mind, it's the difference between seeing the snapshot and seeing the fuller picture. If a person has deeply problematic behavior like that, it doesn't change with their relationship. It's within them, and that behavior goes wherever they go until they take the time and energy and introspection to start to even work through it. It's not an instant thing. Okay. Embers says, I definitely have CPTSD, but wonder whether I also might have ADD, attention deficit disorder, since I was diagnosed with slight learning disabilities with memory and concentration. How do you test for ADD? So you can, there's kind of a checklist. Basically, there's a checklist for ADD symptoms. You're ranking them from kind of, I forget, I want to say, I think it's not at all to very often. So your psychiatrist or nurse practitioner or whoever you might go see is and I should say, therapists can diagnose you with this as well, but um, if you're going to try to get medication, that practitioner generally likes to be the one that does the screening, especially since there's a lot of controversy around certain ADD medications, especially stimulants. But it's a very quick test. And keep in mind too that this is not an ironclad thing. A lot of the kind of psychological testing isn't, um, a for certain thing. It's a soft science. So it's more. So I guess what I'm saying, it's more of a self-report. um, Other people, like a teacher or a therapist or a psychiatrist, might notice certain traits within you and say, hey, you know what, you might want to just go get tested for this to see. And um, there are some signs here that you might have ADD. A lot of truly effective ADD treatment, however, it's not just medication. It's medication and learning a very different way to do things. So I speak from experience with this, and that can definitely feel like an uphill climb through, shin deep mud, maybe even hip deep mud. It can really feel like its own challenge to relearn how to do things. But if um, if you have certain symptoms of ADD, at a minimum, learn how to do things differently is going to help. So if there's kind of no harm in that. Um, yeah. So yeah, just some thoughts. But yeah, talking to a medical practitioner will help. Okay, let's see. Rick says, if some guy bought me an $8,000 purse, I would keep it, but I would never talk to him again. Well, yeah, that's quite the gift. I for the most part am hopelessly practical and would fall out of my chair at the thought of somebody spending $800, let alone $8,000 on a purse. My reaction would be like, do you know how far $8,000 can go? Do you know what we could buy with 8,000? And that would be going through my mind. It's a gift. I would be gracious and not say those things, but I would not be deep inside. I would be panicking. Miss Bryant says it was probably a knockoff purse. Yeah, it probably was, frankly. Uh, Gideon says, how to survive the divorce process, as this itself is a narcissist tool to abuse by making me suffer with false allegations and fake cases against me. One of the best tools you have in your toolkit for this is anticipation. So realize this is what it's going to involve. You're dealing with somebody who plays to win at all cost, and they don't play fair. They don't think the rules apply to them. They feel victimized if they don't win. So yes, expect this kind of stuff and prepare yourself as best as you can. Prepare yourself by getting support before and after you have to deal with anything having to do with the court or divorce proceedings, or before you have to see them. So getting support ahead of time and then getting support right after. Maybe if you have a therapist, meeting with a therapist before, and then seeing if you can send your therapist a follow-up message after, or go out with, have a friend over for coffee, or now it's, pandemic stuff. So maybe not going out with a friend, but going for a walk, doing something that you enjoy right after. I forget who came up with it, but the term is called bookending. So when we have something stressful, putting something before it and then putting something after it will really help tremendously. So, and then also using the power of anticipation by uh, um, thinking about, okay, any and all communication with them they're probably going to try to use anything that they can against you. Prepare for this. Keep all communication with them in writing, keep it polite, keep it professional, and keep it brief. If things start to go really astray, I see about getting a third party mediator through the court and using one of their mediator apps. At your home, changing your locks if you haven't already, potentially installing cameras outside, um, being very mindful and intentional about who you do and do not share information with, kind of knowing who within your inner circle is potentially compromised. So, and it happens when people aren't on the receiving end of this craziness, they don't understand it. And so they can be very easily manipulated and swayed. So if you have a family member that, or friends or whoever that kind of feels like they need to take the middle ground and talk to both of you, um, and they don't understand how manipulative your ex is or how much damage that he's doing, I wouldn't say a word. I wouldn't say a word negative about him. I wouldn't say a word about what you're planning on doing or the type of attorney you have or that you're dating somebody new, anything. I would really shut down any significant conversation with them and just keep it surface level until all of this blows over, because it's amazing the stuff that people let slip. They just don't think about it, you know? So being very mindful about that and just being extra good to yourself. That can help is um, another thing that can help is to um, really think about what your future version of you would hope that you would do during this time. This was one of my biggest takeaways in my own experience, was realizing the only thing that I knew for certain. I had so much freaking stress going on in my life. It was just coming at me at all angles. It was unreal. The one thing that I knew for certain was that I was not going to look back on this experience or this time in my life and think, boy, you know what? I really wish I would have worried about things more. Or, boy, you know what? I really wish I would have been more anxious about things. And so realizing that there would eventually come a day where all of this would be over and my emotions wouldn't be so heightened, that there would come a day where I would reflect back on this time in my life and knowing that, how did I want to feel about what I was going through at the time? And that made it so much easier to kind of regain a larger perspective about things, and to allow myself to take time, to take time to relax, to take time to be good to myself and to unwind. Because that's what my future self, and that's what your future self would be thinking. Your future self would be like, man, I really wish that the old me, which is the you today, I really wish that the old me would have taken some time to really pour all of that stress and frustration into her hobbies or working out or um, cultivating relationships with kind of old friends, or just setting aside 30 minutes a night for making that your own decompression time. That's more probably along the lines of how your future you will hope that you handle things. So, uh, so start doing that now, and you'll start feeling tremendously better too. So it's kind of a win-win. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll here. Um, let's see. Wine Love says, after I broke up with a narcissist, I feel like everyone in the world is against me and gossiping about me, and I kept seeking validation from others. On a personal level, I can absolutely relate to this. So I'll kind of share with you what was going on with me at that time, and maybe some of what I'm saying is can relate. You can relate. So I think those feelings of everyone in the world is against you and gossiping about you, when we go through these really like dramatic, erratic, highly emotional relationships, it's so over the top that um, most people tend to like it's like a lifetime TV movie, you know. And for somebody that hasn't been in a situation like this, it seems kind of hard to believe. And so there is kind of this level of suspicion from other people, which I think only kind of furthers our feelings of distrust and paranoia. And the reality is they probably, if they know about our situation, they probably are gossiping about it because it's absolutely gossip worthy, right? I mean, it's probably the juiciest story going around the office or that they've heard in a long time because it's like a lifetime TV movie. It's not your run of the mill breakup. It's it's a bunch of outrageousness. So people do talk. Um, I know for me on a personal level, those feelings that everybody was against me were very much mixed in with feelings of paranoia. And that just had to do with the level. I had never encountered that level of manipulation or deceit before. And so it just rocked me to my core. And it made me question every other relationship with everybody else in my life. And I don't think I'm alone in that. So that could be part of it. It could also be part of it if this ex is going around, spreading lies or rumors or whatnot. That can definitely be part of that feeling of everybody's against you. And it can also be the fact that not a lot of, unless a person's gone through it, they have a very difficult time empathizing or understanding. And so that kind of level of like suspicious indifference from other people can come across in it because it's very re-victimizing, it's very minimizing, and there's a huge level of re-victimization that goes along after the ending of these relationships. A lot of it's well intended of, oh yeah, I always knew that guy was trouble, or I can't believe it took you so long to see it, or oh, I'm so glad you finally left, or um, you should be happy that this relationship is over. That these kinds of things. It tends to come from a place of wanting to, uh, I don't know, it's other people's frustrations with the situation from the crazy making, but and sometimes it's a weird kind of way to try to empower you, but it can feel very re-victimizing, which feels like everybody's against you. The seeking validation from others, even though you're feeling that everybody's against you and gossiping, that seeking validation, uh, I think more often than not tends to stem from we just don't trust our own judgment. So at the ending, your head's all spun around at the end of these relationships. And most people don't know what's up from down. They're incredibly vulnerable for that reason. If and just stress alone, not even the manipulation, the lies, any psychological or emotional abuse, just stress, high degrees of stress can cause all kinds of issues with concentration, issues with kind of sequential thinking. And when I was going through this, I referred to that time in my life as I was having mashed potatoes for brains because that's literally like what it felt like. And I would call my mom constantly, she lived in another state, and would run all kinds of just kind of basic ideas past her. And I had and I should say basic ideas and then just all kinds of ideas. I had some really just wild ideas going through my mind. I was just all over the place, all over the place. And I needed kind of that security of, I needed like a voice of reason in my life at that time to just kind of anchor me to reality because my brain was just everywhere all at once. So, you know, I don't know if how much of that pertains to your situation, but that need for continual validation from other people. I think for a lot of people, it tends to be just continually doubting ourselves and thinking, wow, if I really, my judgment was way off about this person. And if it could be so off in one situation, then what other situations could it be way off in? And that's anxiety inducing. And then it just kind of creates this spiral. So, yeah. Okay. Huffle Mom was saying the one negative message that Jack says most frequently after putting himself down is, this is the only way I'll learn. So how would I handle that? I would encourage you to talk to Jack ahead of time about that. And I mean, he's right here in the chat, but to continue this conversation after the chat and say, okay, you know what? You're telling yourself, I hear a lot of what you're saying, a lot of these kind of core beliefs, but Jack, they're not true. This isn't accurate. This is not accurate thinking. And it's not true that the only way you'll learn is to put yourself down. And it can help to find references to back up your counter argument to what he's telling himself. So finding other references of, well, you know what, you learned how to, I don't know, repair the shed, and you didn't have to put yourself down to learn that. You learned how to be an amazing partner to me, and you didn't have to put yourself down to do that. You learned how to cook lasagna, and you didn't have to learn to put yourself down doing that. So, you know, and if that doesn't work, because he might say, no, I did. I put myself down in every one of those situations. I really had to kind of just give myself a kick in the gut. And that was the only way I'll learn. Even if that is the case, there are other ways to learn. And there's research has shown, that shaming a person isn't constructive. So they might learn, if they even learn. I mean, more often than not, a person getting bullied into changing isn't that effective. And it tends to, even if they do make that change, then there's other damage that occurs. So I think just based off of that, we can say this is not the most constructive way to go about doing things. Like, that's the hard way to go about doing things. So this isn't the only way he'll learn. It might be a main way he's learned for a long time, but there are other ways. You don't have to beat yourself up and uh, shame yourself and do all these things to drive a point home. So yeah, seeing if he's open to working on that, to you kind of catching him or bringing it to his attention when he slips into that kind of extreme negative all or nothing type thinking. And if he's open to, hey, you know what, can I counter? Are you okay with me countering these messages? And if so, it would be really helpful, because he needs to believe it in order for the programming to change. Can you help me come up with some examples, or let's come up with some examples together of times that you didn't have to learn by bullying yourself or failing, these kinds of things. Okay, let's see here. Ember's Fireworkers says, oh my God, I say about the same. My story is like a horrific Lifetime movie that no one wants to see. Cross between Sleeping with the Enemy, Enough, and Safe Haven, but without a hunk at the end. Yeah. I mean, it's just wild. And it's so hard to ask not even to ask for help, but to share our experience, any part of our experience, when we have a hard time even understanding what happened. Uh, and there can be so much shame and embarrassment because when we start saying it out loud, it's like, oh my God, like what did I get involved with? What the hell? But you know what? Everybody that's in these extreme situations feels the exact same way. It's so much like leaving a cult. Nobody thinks they'd ever get involved in a cult. Um, and everybody thinks that if they did get involved with a cult or had a cult or somehow approach them, that they would see it for what it is. And everybody would be wrong. So, some cults are more obvious, just like some problematic people are more obvious than others. Not all cult members wear the same color and, um, have kind of bizarre beliefs that they're going to go, catch the tail end of Halley's Comet and be transported to, to whatever. That's pretty extreme. I think most people, but even then, like there's this whole kind of indoctrination phase where, sorry, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but if you've ever sat through a seminar, if you've ever gotten roped in to some sort of, I don't like multi-level marketing thing or some sort of very, I don't know, convince at real estate seminars, these kinds of things. If you've ever had this happen where you go in with your guard up, you're like, I know exactly what this, or timeshare, some sort of, thing that, you're like, I don't want to be in this. I'm never going to use this. This is going to be a waste of money. And you start listening and that speaker is so convincing and they're really selling you on it. And if you have a friend who gets up, this is a very suspiciously specific story, isn't it? Because I had this happen. If you have a friend who gets up and let's say goes to the bathroom, right, and they come back, but they've missed like the most compelling part, like the climax of the story, uh, or the sales pitch, and they're not feeling it, and and you're like, no, 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 this is amazing. This is this amazing opportunity. And this all makes so much sense. And oh my gosh, I'm so woke. Like I get it and nobody else does. And you need to get it too. And you're trying to explain this to them, but they don't get it. And they're like, what is wrong with you? Like what on earth? Um, what happened? I was gone for 10 minutes. I come back and now you're ready to sign up for whatever this is. Persuasion is is persuasive and it's very difficult to break free from that if especially if we're feeling vulnerable or uh, whatnot. So the point of that is outsiders, people that weren't there kind of for that whole indoctrination period, they're not roped in to it versus, and it's very similar to a person that gets into a highly manipulative and abusive relationship. They're not there for all of the ups and downs, the small ups and downs, the the push pull, the I love you, the I hate you, the you're so great for me. Oh, but here's also everything that's wrong with you. That they're not there for that, and so they don't see it, and so they think, oh yeah, I would never stay in a relationship like that or whatever. And so talking to them about it, just it feels very re-victimizing, and they because they don't get it. Okay, so let's see here. Mm, Kenneth asks, hey, Dana, do you ever have a complete lack of motivation to even get out of bed in the morning? If so, how do you deal with it? Yes. So I think, as most of you know, I tend to struggle with pretty, I would say, major depression. It's been going on since I was a teenager. And when it's just so challenging. I recently found some medication that I was doing really well on, and then found out that it was causing extremely dangerously crazy high blood pressure, and I had to get off of it. So, which was so defeating because I feel like I'm back to square one again. But when I have, so yes, the point being, I can absolutely relate to that. When I go through those depressive episodes, I have no motivation to do anything. not to shower, not to brush my teeth, not to do laundry. Very quickly, my external environment just falls apart. My car gets trashed, my bedroom, my living areas just become cluttered and messy. I just don't care. And I don't even care that I don't care. I just don't care. And there so yeah. Um and I think a lot of that has to do with stress and feelings of overwhelm and depression. So if it's something that you've been struggling with for really longer than a few weeks, I would encourage you to go talk to your doctor about it. Um, One of the things that has helped me on a besides the right medication and making some significant changes in my life has been to give myself something to look forward to, a reason to get out of bed in the morning. I love coffee. Coffee gets me out of bed. So if you're a coffee drinker thinking, okay, what kind of really, indulgent type treat can I make for myself first thing in the morning? It's difficult to get motivated when you know that you're just going to have a day of drudgery ahead of you. But if you can give yourself some sort of compelling reason, whatever that might be, maybe it's extra time in the shower, or maybe making showering more enjoyable. I have a lot of these shower bombs I've been experimenting with, but they're lovely. They're scented, they have essential oil, they smell amazing. It completely perks my mood up. These kinds of things. So taking those daily tasks that really maybe aren't so motivating and then adding something to them so you don't have to push yourself so much. The enjoyment of the thing pulls you. That's really helpful. Jack makes the comment, I'm repeating a lot of old messages that my dysfunctional family drilled into me hard. Yes, it sounds like you absolutely are. And it's, um, I'll email you something here. Probably, hold on. I need to write it down or else it does not exist. Hold on. Let me see. Oh, shoot. I have nothing to write on around here. Okay. Yeah. I can email you something about core beliefs. It's really helpful. So if you're open to exploring those core beliefs and changing the the messages that you're telling yourself, I would encourage you to work with Huffle Mom with that. It sounds like she's willing and able to do this with you. So catching first, awareness is always the first step. Awareness that there's a problem. So identifying some of these core beliefs that surface, and I would encourage you to get a piece of paper, writing them down, writing as many of them down as you can. And this can absolutely feel like peeling an onion. So just when you think you've got to the end of it, it just keeps going. Like there's layer after layer after layer, and that's okay. I think that's the case for probably a lot of us. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. So um, each time you go to do this exercise, you're probably going to realize other dysfunctional core beliefs are going to surface, I guess is what I'm saying. And that's okay, because then you can address them as they surface, but writing down the ones that are the low-hanging fruit that you do come across first, writing them down, and then coming up, realizing this is the wounded child response. And it's not true. It's not. Anything that's an absolutes never is true, especially when it comes to core beliefs. There's gray area there, a ton of gray area there. And so paying attention to what is the core belief and noticing when you're internalizing it. So like you said, this is the only way that I'll learn. Basically, I'm incapable, or I'm unable to learn any other way. Well, that's not true. It's not. So noticing that the untruth of that core belief, and then coming up with a more adaptive adult response, which is that middle ground of, you know what? Yeah, okay, I made a mistake with this, or this didn't work out as planned, but you know what? I do a lot of things right. Like I'm capable of learning. Um, here are here's a list of things, and then proving to yourself this new message. So it's not just kind of airy fairy up in the sky. It has no weight to it. You're proving to yourself the truth, which is this disempowering message isn't the truth. It's just garbage that I have been fed and that I'm continuing to eat. And I don't need to do this anymore. It's not helpful to do it because it's not just because it hurts your feelings, because it's not true. So figuring out, okay, well, what is the truth? And you'll know when you find kind of that gray area, that more adaptive adult response, because it will resonate with you as truth. So, okay, I don't learn this way. Okay, maybe the adaptive response is, okay, maybe I don't learn that way, but I learn in many other ways and many other situations, and I've learned many new things over the past week or year or whatever it is. The key to changing this belief is to come up with an adaptive adult response that resonates with you. So if you kind of need to keep backing it up and making it softer. So for example, an extreme um, jump, and again, this is extreme in watching out for that all or nothing language. If you were to say, okay, my new empowering message is everything works out. Uh, Everything always works out for me. Or uh, I can figure out anything, stuff like that. That tends to not resonate as truth, right? Because it's extreme and it's an absolute statement. So softening that. I can figure out most things if I apply enough time and energy and effort to it. That tends to sit better, right? It feels more true. I'm like, yeah, okay, there's truth in that. Given enough time, if you're like, no, Dana, for real, I don't understand algebra. I'll never understand math. Math is not my thing. Spend enough time and energy on it for the next 6 months. I guarantee you'll have come quite a long way. So yeah, just some points to think about. Okay, let me scroll here. Right? UNA says, yeah, who put that negative idea in your mind? Then when you think of it, consider the source. Yes. Huffle Mom says, an absolutist belief, I am a bad girl. Truth, it's not possible for little children to be bad. Grown people only tell kids that because they know they are doing something bad to them. You are good. Yeah, I like that. People have bad behavior, especially kids. Kids might have quote unquote bad behavior or problematic behavior, but that doesn't make them bad. There's a difference there. Just like failing a test doesn't make you a failure. It just means you failed the test. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll here. Jupiter says, is it normal when someone on a first date says, I would never date a woman like you, like based on appearances? I do not have any chemistry, and then give you a squeamish look? Is that maybe a better way to phrase this is the difference between how common is it for somebody to say this? Is it common for somebody to say something like that? Um, Probably not. I think most people are more tactful than that, but That's the challenge. I mean, thankfully it's a first date, and there's always that risk of, okay, there's just not going to be an attraction here or chemistry here, and it can, a big part of dating is rejecting other people, and it's being rejected. And it helps, I think, to prepare ourselves for that. Um, but doing either is difficult. It's painful, of course, to be rejected, but it's also painful to reject somebody who's interested in you and you're not interested in them. So part of kind of emotional maturity when it comes to dating is knowing that we're ready, knowing we're ready to date, and having the emotional maturity to date, but also having the emotional maturity to end relationships, because it takes both skill sets to date. And we're not really taught with how to end things, especially, I don't know where you are in the world, but here in the United States, um, most people don't communicate directly like that. So there tends to just be the person just falls off the planet, kind of ghosts you or whatever, if they're not interested after the date. Or if you're not interested, it kind of just tends to fizzle out, like these kinds of things. So, um, yeah. But if you had that happen and you had your feelings hurt, that's completely understandable. I think pretty much anybody would. It's it's one thing to just not have chemistry, but it's another thing to kind of be so harsh about it, and to kind of need to tear the other person down in the process. Like, that's unnecessary. Um, let's see. Let me scroll here. Peanut Butter asks, is it normal for a narcissist to have a family? Yes. Yes, it is. Yep. In fact, I would say, I was actually thinking about something along the same lines today, how on paper, it's normally a lot of narcissists, if not all narcissists, tend to fall into that avoidant um, attachment style. There's just not a deep connection to other people. This can be very confusing because a lot of them on the surface do seem like they really want to have relationships. They're married, they have kids, or they date all the time. They tend to run. They tend to be very intense and seem like they really, really, really want a relationship. So that can be confusing as far as like, well, how is this person avoidant when all of their actions kind of say otherwise? But the difference is they're avoidant on an emotional level, on a truly emotional level. Like, there is no empathy, there is no sincerity, um, there is no understanding of other people as anything other than objects for them. uh, they don't see the autonomy in other people. So when that's lacking, then so is that ability to have a relationship of any depth. So while you might see narcissists or sociopaths married, having kids, all kinds of stuff, it's for any number of reasons, but it's not because that they care. They just don't have that part of them is just broken. So there is no sincerity there. It's they want a spouse because of social status, or because it's convenient to have two incomes, or because uh, they I don't know, they want to have kids because they think it'd basically be fun to relive their life again through another person, or maybe even their family or religion is pushing them to have kids. And so they're like, okay, well, or maybe it's just sort of like, okay, well, I'll just get married and have kids. That's just what people do. But in their mind, they're like, well, I'm still going to do whatever I'm going to do, and I'll be married. So I'll still cheat, I'll still lie, I'll still just do my own thing, and I'll also be married. But to them, marriage is nothing. It's when they get married, it's all for them. There is no sense of mutuality, and there's no uh, sincere recognition or appreciation of the other person. Okay, yeah. Huffle Mom asks, hey, Restovin asked, can you discuss deal breakers? Yes. So deal breakers are anything that you decide they are. And with that said, there's certain deal breakers that I would, uh, frankly, that you're better off, that I think really are better off being more of a universal thing, and then adding your own spin, adding your own deal breakers onto them, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So for example, for me, any abuse, active and destructive addictions, or adultery is a deal breaker. That's it. I'm done. That's just the basics. So outside of that, there's lots of deal breakers. I don't want to date somebody who's really messy. Um, I don't. I'm trying to think of other things that I just would be like, absolutely not. Um, Somebody who has a rotten attitude. Like they don't even have to be abusive, but if it's just this continual kind of woe is me, or constant criticism, everything I do, they're playing devil's advocate or they're arguing about it. Like I just don't, it's just draining. So, um, so with that said, yeah, kind of getting clear on what are some of those deal breakers for you. And again, everybody's going to be different on this. Some people, it might be religion. Some people, it might be lifestyle. Um, let's say, for example, my brother is a good example. My brother is a personal trainer. He's super fit. Exercise, he's a gym rat. Exercise is his life. It has been since he was a little kid. This is just his thing. Exercise, eating right, he just loves it. And he only dates girls that are gym rats too, because that's his lifestyle. And a person that um, there would be too much of a disconnect there for him to date a non-gym rat. So that's his thing. That's his deal breaker. um, I'm trying to think of some other common ones. I don't know if a person has kids, or maybe if they don't have kids, or if they don't want kids, that can be a deal breaker. If a person is dating and they um, let's say they really want to get married, but you're at a place where you're like, I don't want to get married, then that would be a deal breaker. Or vice versa, they don't want to get married and you're at a place where you really do want to get married, deal breaker. um, they Let's say they're an absolute city person, they want to live in the heart of Manhattan, and you're like, hell no, I'm give me a ranch in Montana kind of a person. If that's a big thing and it's going to dictate where you live, then that could potentially be a deal breaker. So there's so many things, and deal breakers don't necessarily, they for sure don't have to mean that that other person is wrong or bad. It's just, we have to use a healthy level of discernment, especially when we're dating or even creating friendships with other people, when we're allowing them into our inner circle, thinking, um, does this work for me? Is this person a kind of a good fit for my inner circle? And that can be very difficult because there's all kinds of feelings that can come up. Oh, I'm being rude. Oh, I'm being judgmental. That's not fair. Nobody's perfect. I should give them a chance. I'm not perfect either. Da 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 da. But I'll tell you, our lives uh, start to have problems, and when we start to really compromise. So, especially when we're compromising those things that are significant to you, and this is why it's such an individual process. So you might be more flexible in one area than another person. And that's okay. This is why it's important too to turn inward and to uh, be able to rely on your own decision and your own judgment of a person in a situation of, is this for you, instead of looking outside of yourself, asking other people, what do you think? Do you think I should go on a second date with this guy? Do you think I should do this? Do you think I should, study philosophy in college? Do you think I should buy, a Toyota or a Tesla? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? There's nothing wrong with getting advice. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. However, when it becomes a problem is if we're unable to make up our own mind, or we take we place way too much weight on the opinions of others and completely discount or just turn down the volume on how we really feel about things, because we're the ones that have to live with the consequences of our decisions, not them. So thinking about, yeah, kind of what's a deal breaker for you. This is all part of just really truly getting to know yourself. And here's something to think about too, like we were talking about earlier, how kind of this vetting process of other people, it's not a one and done thing. So like you can kind of quote unquote screen someone and things are fine, but then boom, you hit a snag, or boom, you hit a like major deal breaker. That's kind of that whole process. It's just this continual testing of the waters and seeing, okay, does this still work for me? Does this still work for me? Does this still work for me? And if not, what needs to be adjusted here? So do I need to be more assertive? Do I need to get some distance? Do I need to communicate differently? Do I need to just get a restraining order? Like what needs to happen in order for this situation to feel more comfortable for you? Do I need to slow things down? Is this relationship moving too fast? What is it? And realizing too that our deal breakers um, they're always going to be in flux. So your deal breakers, if you're, let's say, your deal breakers when you're 20 and dating are probably going to be very different than they are when you're 40, or if you're 70 or 90, whatever it might be. However, I would encourage you to have the common theme among all of your deal breakers to have at the core deal breakers be that you just won't tolerate being treated disrespectfully, um, or with a lack of dignity. So, and to really value your emotional health, value emotional safety in another person, a friend or a significant other. That's that's big. Having deal breakers, again, it varies from person to person. Having deal breakers on kind of more superficial things, or what seems like superficial things, for some people, that's a big deal. Like my brother, that's his thing. He only dates like really fit women. And it's not just because he likes the way they look, but it's the lifestyle. That's his thing. It would be a deal breaker for him to date anybody else. My former in-laws were huge. I've huge baseball fans. I never talk about that. I've never met people that have been more into baseball. In my opinion, I always thought baseball was about sitting around drinking beer. Like I really didn't know people truly watched the game. It was more of a like in the background. Oh, okay, we're gonna go out to the ballpark and sit and have a few beers and just kind of periodically watch the game. No, 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 no. They scored every single thing. They taped games, they rewatched them. It was to a whole level I didn't even know existed. And they loved baseball so much. There's no way they could be married to any other people, frankly, other than them, because they'd have to be super hardcore baseball fanatics for that to work. And that's okay. So, they wouldn't have been happy in any relationship with somebody that didn't want them watching sports, or who was saying, well, I really think we just need to limit sports to 2 hours on Sunday. Like, that would have never flown with them. So it's knowing yourself and being okay with what you find, I guess. um let's see. Here's the other thing too, with like, I just want to reiterate, if somebody else has deal breakers, and that's their own, that's on them. That doesn't, if you have something about you that falls into deal breaker territory, that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It just means that you're not a good fit for that person. That's it. And we're not all great fits for every single person out there. In fact, it's probably less than like 5% of the people out there. That might even be generous. So just like when we truly get grounded within ourselves and what matters to us and what our priorities are, we'll feel the same of, what, there's probably only about 5% of the population that's really going to be a good fit for you. And this is, dating is a process. This is why they call it looking for the one, not, the 100. So this is where rejection comes into play, and it's learning how to handle that rejection. And the person who, Jupiter, I think it was, who was talking about the person saying, oh, I'm not attracted to you, there's no chemistry, basically, we're done. We also don't have to internalize it, even if it's directed at us, like that is. Like, that's such a harsh, unnecessarily cruel thing to tell a person. Um, but we don't have to internalize that and be like, I'm not attractive, there's something wrong with me, there's this, there's that. We can realize, wow, okay, that was a really harsh and unnecessarily hurtful way to go about things. A simple, it was nice meeting you, I just really don't feel like we have a lot of chemistry to move forward. Have a lovely evening. It suffices. Like, I don't need to hear a long list of everything that you don't like about me. Frankly, I don't care. Like, we just met, right? So there really, hopefully isn't a lot of emotion invested and not a lot of time wasted. If it's a short, this is also another reason I encourage like a 0 date or a very casual first date, especially if you meet online, because the difference between meeting online and meeting in person, it can be shocking and very, very, very awkward if there is no connection there. So I'm a big fan. Meet for coffee during the day, 45 minutes, let the person know ahead of time. And that way it stays casual. It's not this whole hyped up event. It's not super awkward. Um, and also it's about respecting and valuing your time and your emotions and your energy and all of that. So, like, reserving a Saturday night for somebody for a first date to go out for dinner or to have, hours long things planned. It just, to me, I think it's not valuing your time. It's investing way too much on a gamble. Like, the odds of this, I mean, I hate to sound like, a big wet blanket here, but again, the odds of this relationship ending up into marriage is very, very slim. So kind of realizing, taking dating with that more of a casual attitude of, I need to keep my expectations in check, instead of thinking every single time, okay, this person could be the one. Okay, this person could be the one. It's just too much, and you're setting yourself up for a lot of hurt and heartache. So kind of keeping things light and letting them unfold as they will. Okay, let's see here. Let me scroll up. Mm, see. Okay, Wine Love says, can you talk about two narcissists? If they date, would they both lie and cheat and need attention? You know, a pathological or like a deeply problematic degree of narcissism manifests in a wide range of ways because everybody's different. So not all narcissists cheat, not all narcissists lie. Not all narcissists are verbally abusive or even psychologically abusive. There's just such a wide range of behavior. However, probably the one constant there, the problem with narcissism, okay, is it's this level of extreme kind of self-absorption. So it's all about them all of the time. And this inability to really see other people as individuals. And so the result of that, there's this concept kind of called one mind, where it's this, and it's a very it's this huge sign of emotional immaturity, but it's this um, thinking that little kids have it. It's thinking that um, you know what they're thinking, you kind of know what their needs are, that um, that you're there for them, kind of a thing. And that you should, the book, Patricia Evans' book, The Verbally Abusive Relationship, does a great job of really explaining this concept. She refers to it as, for a narcissist or a quote unquote abusive person, they have this one mind concept where the object of their, I don't know what you call it, affection, um, the other person in life, it's like a child with a teddy bear. And so when a child has a teddy bear and they have this imaginary friend, that teddy bear, it always agrees with them. It knows exactly how they feel. It knows exactly what they need. It knows exactly what they want. They share one mind. And that's a normal stage in development. If a person's cognitively progressing on track, they grow out of that. For abusive people, they somehow kind of get locked into this mindset, and to a very extreme and very problematic extent, where they always think that they're right, and they're just flabbergasted when other people have their own thoughts and feelings and opinions and all of this, because it differs from theirs. So whenever there's any sign of individuality that they don't like or that they find threatening, they try to stomp that out because it's not acceptable to them. So you can see that kind of behavior in motion. It's not conducive to having a happy, healthy, well-adjusted relationship. It's actually relationship poison. So if you've got two people that are incredibly self-absorbed, they really feel like it should just be all about them all of the time. This complete inability to allow space for the other person to be an individual, to disagree, to have their own thoughts, and all of these things. You've got two people that are coexisting. These relationships tend to be very tumultuous if they ever even last for more than a few months. Because when we've talked about this before, but their relationships run in a cycle. And you might be familiar with that cycle of narcissistic abuse. It's the idealize, devalue, discard. But even normal, quote unquote, normal relationships also run in a cycle. So you have this idealized stage, which is like infatuation. It's that feeling of, oh my God, this other person's so amazing. I'm thinking about him all the time. I want to talk to him all the time. You're just kind of fixated on this other person. And you're seeing everything, you're seeing all of the commonalities between the two of you. It's rose-colored glasses kind of phase. When that starts to wear off is when differences start to surface. Because during that infatuation phase, our brain is filling in a lot of the gaps, and it's creating this whole fantasy unbeknownst to us. is creating this whole fantasy about this person or this situation. And it's very easy to mistake that fantasy with reality. We do this in all kinds of situations, frankly, any new situation. You go to get a new car, you get a new job, you meet a new friend, all of these things, your brain starts filling in the gaps of how you think, because your brain's all about anticipating. So it's filling in all of the gaps, trying to create this picture of what you think the situation is going to be. But that's not reality. And so when that reality starts to show cracks, that's when the relationship even remotely starts to get real. So that phase is more of a like a negotiation or a power struggle phase. If you've got team-oriented people, it's a negotiation. If you have one or more people in it that's domination driven, then it's a power struggle. So when differences surface, conflict and confrontation is inevitable, and it's not a bad thing. That's the thing. So disagreeing in and of itself, having differences of opinion, having which use it conflict and confrontation is not a problem. It's actually, if it's done right, if it's done with effective communication, tactfully, open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication, people are being assertive. When it's done right, that's the foundation of the relationship. So a relationship doesn't even start until that negotiation phase starts. Everything before that's just fantasy. It truly, truly is. And if we don't realize that, it can be absolutely emotionally devastating if we're falling in love with somebody, and then we're like, oh, they changed. It's like, no, they didn't change. It just took us this long to see them for who they really are. So it, if the relationship ends during that infatuation stage, it feels like we've lost our soulmate. But really, it's just that infatuation. A lot of, especially with highly manipulative people who are doing a great job of mirroring our own likes and interests and everything we need, they're kind of painting themselves as the answer to whatever problems we might have. That loss can feel just absolutely deep and cut to the core. So yeah, so I guess realizing that relationship doesn't start till the negotiation phase, and then see how things go, because that's when you'll find out how does this other person handle frustration and anger. How do you handle your own frustration and anger? Every two people are going to have their own dynamic, and we all get activated. We all have unhealed stuff from our childhood. And so different relationships can and will activate others more readily than others. So kind of seeing, okay, how are we going to handle this when this stuff all starts to surface? And you'll see, how does this person communicate, or or not communicate? Do they withdraw? Do they shut down? Do they shame? Do they blame? Do they yell? Do they belittle? Do they become intimidating? Do they threaten to leave? How emotionally mature are they? Because if they're doing any of that, that's not emotionally mature behavior. So, and then going back to the whole deal breakers thing, and then asking yourself, are you looking for a partner? Or are you looking for a project? And I highly, highly, highly recommend that you don't look for a project, because most people don't like to be fixed, and it doesn't work anyhow. So, and frankly, all of that behavior that I just described, all of that's forms of verbal and emotional abuse. So according to my own deal breakers, that stuff is a no-go. And so yeah, okay. I hope that answered your question. Let's see. Anna says, hi, Dana and everyone. Happy New Year. In 20 hours and 35 minutes, I'm off to sleep. So, yes, awesome. Happy New Year. I agree. It's right around the corner. I really hope that 2021 is very different than 2020. I don't even know what else to say. I hope it's our best year yet. And I would be curious to know if you guys have any New Year's resolutions or kind of what your thoughts are for the new year. To what are you hoping to leave behind in 2020 and what are you hoping to cultivate in 2021? You know, a good life isn't something that simply happens. It takes having a vision of what that looks like for you and the action to make it happen. Yeah, Fatima. Hi, Fatima. Says is talking to Rocco. Dating apps can be scary. You don't know who you may be talking to behind that screen. Yep, absolutely. Very, very true. Fatima says, I find it better to be alone and stay as an introvert so that way I won't have to deal with drama. I can relate to that. However, I think it's kind of worth noting that that withdrawing uh, is oftentimes avoidance, and avoidance is tends to be a trauma response. So there's nothing wrong with needing your own time and space, kind of being more of an introvert, needing time and space to recharge from other people or wanting to be away from drama. There's absolutely no problem with that. The the challenge with that comes into the older we get if we find ourselves um, avoiding on a deeper level, kind of avoiding all people out of fear of, oh, this person's gonna uh, be abusive or they're gonna judge me or they're gonna let me down or all of these things. Like, okay, I am not only am I my own safe place, I'm my only safe place. That's what extreme avoidance looks like, and that's when it can be more of a trauma response. So just kind of something to keep your eye open about with your own behavior, because it can be easy to slip into thinking, oh, I'm just a homebody, or oh, I'm just an introvert, when really it's that might be part of it, but that desire to be alone um, can be a lot of unprocessed trauma, and it can really uh, it can lead to a very diminished life without connections to other people. I guess the solution to that, Fatima, as I scroll up and see that, yeah, you just validated everything I just said here. Because she says, this may sound strange, but I don't want to interact with people. I keep worrying they may dislike me or that they may say something that I don't like or something will just go wrong. Okay, understandably so, kind of given everything that you've been through. But uh, maybe this kind of might sound kind of strange, but all of those things will happen. So there will be times that a person's not going to like you and that they're going to say something that you don't like, or that something will just go wrong, or that you say something that they don't like. This is all part of two people being human and interacting and having differences of opinion and all kinds of things. So th- that that's going to happen because you experienced so much I think fear and invalidation and just everything that you've gone through. When we go through things like that as a child, and we're walking on eggshells, and there's just this constant fear of the other person, or constant fear that we're going to do something wrong, or you just get tired of it. You're like, you know what? I feel like I can't win. Everything I do is wrong. I'm just going to go stay in my room. It can be difficult to shift out of that mindset and then realize when you are an adult and you are out on your own that you have ways of keeping yourself safe. So as a child, we don't, right? We're kind of at the mercy of our home environment. We're at the mercy of our parents and um, our siblings, and we don't have a lot, if any, c- control over how we're being treated, or any of that. There's no, there tends to be really no um, respect for a child's boundaries or how they feel, or no validation, very limited validation for how kids feel. And a lot of this, um, in your situation, it sounds like this was definitely the case, but even in situations where parents weren't so um, outright abusive, or even parents that are well intended tend to do this. If the child, falls down and scrapes their knee, it's this invalidation of, oh no, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine, when the child's not fine. Or um, kind of no respect for boundaries of, oh well, you need to be friends with everybody. I don't want to hear that you don't want to be friends with this little girl at school, kind of a thing, which completely is like, no, you're entitled to make your own friends and to not like people. um, Things like this. And so the result of that is a person can be become very detached from who they are and their wants and needs and thoughts and feelings and opinions and all of these things, and not have a good sense of who they are. And if they don't have a good sense of who they are, they struggle with knowing where their boundaries are. And so as a result, they tend to look to other people to let them know if they tend to look to other people to treat them appropriately. And they tend to listen to other people if other people uh, tell them that they're being treated appropriately. So even if somebody else is abusive, looking to them for answers or clarity. And if the abusive person says, oh, no, no, I'm not doing anything wrong, you're just too sensitive, too sensitive. You're somehow the cause of this. They will take that as absolute truth because that's what they had to do as kids. And so a big part of becoming an adult is realizing you've leveled up. Like you have a lot more tools in your toolkit than you did when you were 8 years old. So as an adult, we have ways to keep ourselves safe. You have the right to be friends with who you want, to end situations that are not for you, that simply just aren't a good fit, or that are, especially those that are harmful. And we protect ourselves as an adult through boundaries, standards, and deal breakers. And when I say protect ourselves, it's not just our emotional and physical health, it's everything. We protect our time, we protect our body, we protect um, everything, everything with you and that you're responsible for. So that power shifts. Now you're in charge. And that can feel a little overwhelming at first, but it can also be really empowering because it's um, and it's one of those things where I think it was, I don't know if it was yesterday or last week, we were talking about this on the live stream about the realization of you can just end a relationship. Like you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait until it gets horrifically bad, or you don't have to wait until there's concrete proof that this person is in fact cheating, or is in fact abusive, or up to no good, or whatever. Having squirrely behavior, having perpetually confusing behavior, having conversations that never go anywhere, like ineffective communication, those are all valid reasons to end a relationship. Simply just like I mentioned with my former in-laws, for them, simply not liking baseball to a fanatical level is enough of a reason to end a relationship. So you have a lot more control and power over your life than you may realize. And so these other types of situations, so part of that, the boundaries and standards and deal breakers and valuing yourself and valuing your time is making that shift. You said, okay, I keep worrying that they may not like me. Okay, kind of anticipating that, realizing you don't have to internalize this. So what? So what if they don't like you? It's going to happen. It doesn't mean that you're bad or wrong or unlikable or unlovable or any of that. It just means that you're not their cup of tea. There's lots of people that don't like me. So like it happens, and it's hurtful, but that doesn't mean that at the core I'm an unlikable person. It just means that for whatever reason they don't like me, and that's okay. As far as saying that they may say something that you don't like, well, that's going to happen too. But this is where effective communication comes into play. So depending on what they say and how they say it and all that, being assertive and speaking up for yourself. So if they say something mean or cruel or something that violates a boundary, that you're able uh, to speak up and kind of find balance with that. If and if something does go wrong, things go wrong. That's life. Life eh, uh, um, really, this is going to sound very fatalistic, and I don't mean it to sound this way, but really, life is a series of problems because life is all about growth. And growth is all about change. And change is all about doing things differently. And it's all about learning. And learning comes on the back of failure. So one great way to tell if you're alive is to tell it, do you have problems? If you don't have problems, then you're not living, you're hiding. So, when we kind of um, challenge ourselves and try new things, we're going to have frustration, we're going to have anger, we're going to get upset, we're going to things are going to go wrong. It's all part of it. It truly is all part of it, and that's okay. It's how you respond to it that makes all the difference. So, okay, let me. Fatima says, I mean, I don't care if people don't like me. It's the stuff that comes with it, like spreading rumors or just being nasty all the time. Yeah. Well, and kind of playing that through of, okay, well, what if they do spread rumors? Then what? Then what? You know, we only have control over what we have control over. And if they're going to be spreading rumors, this is why I encourage people to focus on your character, not on your reputation. Or people pleasing or trying to earn somebody's love or any of this kind of stuff, because all of that's fleeting. Character is what really matters. And the people that really know you and know your character, if they do hear rumors, they're going to talk to you about it. They're not going to just blindly believe them. So, um, and if they say nasty stuff, then they say nasty stuff. And that's when people, I think, the older people get, the more of that kind of stuff, gossip, rumors, talking nasty, talking trash about other people, the more emotionally mature of a crowd you're around, the more they see that stuff as the emotionally immature stuff that it is. And so when people do see that stuff as really immature, they also see it as a reflection of the person saying it, not of the person that they're talking about. So it kind of backfires on them. If somebody's really talking trash, it's sort of like, man, wow, you really, like, where are your boundaries? And do you talk about me this way when I leave the room? You probably do. So, when people talk like that, it becomes very clear that they're emotionally unsafe. And most, I shouldn't say most, emotionally mature people can see this. Um, let's see here. Huffle Mom says, talking to Michelle, she says, I've learned to add, and that's okay, when my inner child pops up with any sort of feeling that makes her uncomfortable. Her, I'm scared. Me, and that's okay. I love that. I love that. That's a really great way to validate that, and um, to validate that feeling. You know, so good for you. I really like that. EM says, I never knew growing up that saying things like, oh, you're too sensitive and you just need to get over it, were typical things narcissists do. I grew up believing for so long it was something wrong with me. Yes. And I should add too, this is emotionally immature people in general will say things like this. But yeah, tends to definitely, well, I shouldn't say definitely, more par for the course for narcissists for sure. So it's that chronic invalidation of, and again, it stems from that self-centeredness, right? So from um, a person, emotionally immature person, which narcissists are. So we're kind of talking about one and the same thing here. But it's that feeling of, A, I told a joke. I think it's hilarious. What? You find it rude. You don't think it's hilarious. Well, then there's something wrong with you, because there's nothing wrong with me and my sense of humor. Whereas an emotionally mature person has the, I don't know, social graces, or that understanding that everybody is different. So if they tell a joke and that doesn't land right, and the other person's offended by it, or they don't find it funny or whatever, instead of fighting to get them to see, oh, no, 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 hilarious, it's hilarious, you're too sensitive, you're wrong, you can't, you're making a big deal out of nothing. There's not that pushback. But a person needs a level of emotional maturity and like a healthy ego to be able to kind of handle that rejection, even though it's really mild, or handle that criticism, even though it's really mild. Narcissists tend to not be able to do that. So yeah, the result is this continual minimizing and invalidating of as a child. If you grew up in a home like that as a child, that's what you experience a lot of. It's very much all about grinding down the edges, um, to get you to fit in to kind of their worldview of who they think you should be. So there isn't this allowance of individuality. They'll kind of fight you tooth and nail and try to hammer you into that hole of, um, to get you to be their version of you. And it's very damaging, and it takes a person quite a while to restore that sense of lost identity, and to realize, no, you know what, um, if something bothers you, that doesn't make you too sensitive. It just means that that's not okay with you. That's a boundary for you. So everybody's boundaries are different, and it doesn't make other people too sensitive. And the whole, you just need to get over it. The what a person, well, I guess it depends on the context. Uh, Oftentimes you'll have this with narcissists where they'll do something hurtful to you, but God forbid you hold any grudge, or remember, not even grudge, you remember, you held them accountable for what they did. You bring it up again, maybe even the next day, and they're offended by that. Like, "Ah, that was, no, we've moved past that. You're living in the past. You can't get over things. You're just difficult. You're this, you're that." And the result of this kind of behavior is when a person gets older, oftentimes chronic anxiety for one, but then they also really don't trust their perceptions of things because i- they've been told their whole life like what's up is down and what's down is up. So it's very disorienting, and in trying to get a person back on track with um, becoming comfortable and grounded within themselves and like realizing, you know what, it's okay. It's okay and it's normal and completely reasonable and appropriate for you to have your own wants and needs and thoughts and feelings and opinions that are different from everybody else's. That's what it is to be an individual. Your boundaries are going to be different. Your standards are going to be different. Your deal breakers are going to be different. Lots of things about you are going to be different. And just because somebody else has an issue with it doesn't mean that you're wrong or bad. It just means that there's a difference there. So making that shift as an adult, realizing, oh my gosh, I don't have to internalize this. Somebody might and probably will. It's probably still happen another 20 times in your life at least, where somebody, well, if you have an issue with it, they'll tell you that you're too sensitive. And realizing as an adult, I don't have to internalize this as truth. That's their perspective of events. I'm grounded enough in myself to know that no, what bothers me bothers me. Um, if I don't know, if I don't want olives on my pizza, which I do, but if I didn't want olives on my pizza, that doesn't make me a picky eater. It just means I don't want olives on my pizza. Or if, do you see what I'm saying? Like there's differences there, and it's okay that there's differences. Okay, let's see. Yeah, changing my life says, yep, that's what it is to be an individual. That right there. Yes. Yes. Thanks, Jupiter. Says, I love your channel. Rocco says, mine would always threaten me when he was going to leave. Do you mean like threaten to leave? Or would threaten you while he was going to leave? Like, I'm going to leave you and I'm going to go do X, Y, and Z. Fatima says, I was told I was sensitive so many times. I started to believe and started to act like it. Yeah, that's the result. I mean, it's crazy making when any any issue you had, especially with being mistreated, somehow meant that you're too sensitive. That's a problem. So, and as a result, we tend to learn to turn down the volume of those uncomfortable feelings. So when everybody around us, if so again, sort of like the analogy of the child that falls down and scrapes their knee and they're crying, and the parent says, "Oh no, 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 you're fine, you're fine, you're fine." And the kid's like, "Am I fine? I don't feel fine. I'm bleeding. Like I don't think I'm fine." But everybody around, nobody's validating their feelings. And validation, that mirroring, is such an important part of identity formation, especially in children. It allows us, because we look to other people, you know, is the, in every way, shape, or form, is this how I do this? Is this how I tie my shoe? Is this how I pronounce this word? Did I do this right? Did I do this good? You know, we're little validation machines when we're kids. That's what we need. And we soak up things because this is how that original programming is laid down. And this is how the world works. And here's your place in it. And we get all of that through programming from our parents and those in our immediate inner circle. So if everybody, it's weird, right? Like, so if everybody's telling us, oh, no, 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 you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. It's just, the Monty Python skit, oh, it's just a flesh wound. You're like, no, I'm missing my arm. Like, it's a big deal. The result is, as that child gets older, they become more and more out of tune with emotional pain or even physical pain, because they're being gaslighted. Even though, with my example of the child that scrapes their knee and the parent telling them they're fine when they're not, that is, it's well intended, but it's still damaging. So it's even more extreme and more damaging when a child's being mistreated and by their parents, and their parents are like, no, 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 you're not being mistreated. There's nothing wrong with how we're treating you. You deserved it, or it wasn't that bad, or that never happened, or you're just too sensitive. It's somehow your fault. It's your fault for having a problem with the way that you're being mistreated. Do you see how ridiculous that is? But that's the thing, for emotionally immature people, abusive people, narcissists, sociopaths, you name it, they oftentimes feel so justified in their mistreatment of other people that they fully believe that. So in their mind, because again, it's this feeling of, oh, I'm always right. So if I'm always right, then everybody else has got to always be wrong when there's a disagreement. So if it's the feeling of, oh, well, I mistreated you, if I'm operating from that mindset of, well, I'm always right, then there's only so many options that are left, and they're all going to involve you, or denial. It didn't happen. You've probably heard this before. It's like the narcissist prayer or something. Um, if I mistreated you, no, it didn't really happen. Well, if it did happen, it wasn't that bad. Okay, and if it was that bad, then you probably deserved it. That it's just different levels of foolishness, and that stuff is it's very corrosive. So, um, so I guess with that said, oh, I'm glad. EM says, thank you. It's nice to feel validated that what I experienced was not only real, it was wrong. Yes. Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad. It really is. It is helpful to have that validation and realize, and that's part of why I say at the end of every live stream, like, you're not alone. You are not crazy, and you can heal from this, because a big part of abuse is that level of continual manipulation, where a person does feel like they're crazy. Like, I have a problem with this, but they're telling me I shouldn't have a problem with this, or other people are telling me that it's not a problem, and I feel like I'm losing my mind. And that's all that comes with the territory of being abused, psychologically and emotionally, especially. So what can help with that, to kind of get more grounded within yourself, and to kind of clear up any confusion with that, is to learn about the more um, subtle, I guess you could say, subtle forms of emotional abuse that are out there. If you go to my website, it's thriveafterabuse.com, there's an area under book club, and there's some notes from Patricia Evans' book, The Verbally Abusive Relationship, which I pulled out. I think there was like 15 or so forms of um, verbal abuse, verbal emotional abuse. And it's fantastic, because when most people think about uh, emotional abuse, they think about name calling, belittling, kind of more of the obvious forms of, wow, that's a problem. And they tend to minimize things like withdrawing or withholding or shaming or blaming or diverting, or uh, these kinds of behaviors. And so kind of getting that validation of, yeah, all of these things are a problem, can really help to clear up a lot of confusion with what happened during childhood, and what is most likely happening as an adult too. in your relationships, because there's lots of people out there that um, that have this kind of behavior. So seeing it for what it is huge. Okay, let's see. So I think with that said, I am going to sign off for tonight. I feel like I'm losing my voice. So um, with that said, real quick, if you have a question for me that you would like answered on a live stream, you can either email me at deardana@thriveafterabuse.com, or you can subscribe to the live stream. So if you've already subscribed to get text alerts, it's Dana Live, all one word, to the number 22999. After you subscribed, if you have a question, you can text it to that number as well, and I'll get it. I check that mailbox maybe twice a week, and then I'll answer it on the live streams. So okay. Check. I guess people really want to do a guided meditation. Okay, we'll do that. We'll do that for about 5 minutes, okay? And then we'll call it a night. So, okay, so let's take some time, find a comfortable spot, whether you're sitting or lying down. Take some time to just decompress and breathe. Allowing your body and your mind to become quiet, to unwind and be here in the present moment. And taking a deep breath in through your nose and then out through your mouth. Allowing yourself to be fully present in this moment. And sending each breath deeper down into the bases of your lungs, down into your stomach, allowing your chest and your torso to just easily and effortlessly rise and fall with each breath. Taking some time to untether, release any anxiety we have about the future, any regret or pain about the past. Being fully present in this moment. Taking some time to acknowledge that there is so much that is good and right about you. There is so much that is good and right about life. That you are capable, you are competent, you are creative, you are adaptive. So many things that are good and right about you. acknowledging that you are and that you are an adult, and that you have so much more power and control now in your life, that you know how to protect yourself now. And that is fully reasonable and healthy and appropriate for you to have your own wants and needs and thoughts and feelings and opinions and boundaries and standards and deal breakers. You are an individual, and that's a good thing. Allowing your body to continue to relax. With each breath in, visualize perhaps like a healing breath, like a beautiful, peaceful white light. Breathing in the healing and strength and clarity, and exhaling any residual pain or anger that you're ready to release. Breathing in everything that's healing, and exhaling everything that's ready to be released. Being fully present in this moment, grounded in your body, wiggling your fingers, wiggling your toes, noticing the temperature of the air in the room and the feel of the fabric against your skin. Noticing any other sounds that are around. Being grounded in this moment and in your body, realizing that you are your own safe place, that you are competent, you are capable. There are so many things that you do have control over. That you know how to protect yourself. That you are always learning and growing. That you're dedicated to personal growth. Like that's huge. That's really powerful. That right there puts you kind of in the top 1% of people. That you're dedicated. You're dedicated to self-awareness and self-actualization and of living a life of purpose on purpose. These are all wonderful, wonderful things. And continuing to breathe. Realizing that you have the power. You are the captain of your own ship. You are the author of your own story. You get to decide when each chapter starts and ends, and how long it is, and who's in it. And with that said, I really hope that this next chapter in your life, especially the start of 2021, a brand new year, that you make the declaration and the dedication to have this be one of your best years yet. And one of the ways that we can do that is not to rely on situations to all line up and be good, but to decide ahead of time that whatever comes down the stream, that we're going to take that and we're going to use it for our highest and greatest good. Because that's what growth is all about. That's what life is all about. And it's not easy, but it can be done. We can't control many of the things, well, some of the things at least that happen to us, but we can control how we perceive it and we can control how we respond to it. And with that said, go ahead and open your eyes when you're ready. Okay. So, thank you guys so much for being here and for joining me. And I look forward to seeing you next week. So if you're new to these live streams, I try to do them every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. They go for, I don't know, 2 to 3 hours. It just depends. And like I said, if you have any questions, you can email me, deardana@thriveafterabuse.com. I'll try to answer them on the next live stream. Or if you'd like to be notified when I do go live, you can text Dana Live, all one word, to the number 22999. So thank you guys so much. Just lots of love to you as always. You are not alone. You are not crazy. And you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care, and I'll see you next week. Okay.